All right, I want to address this issue because it keeps coming up, and to me it makes no sense. Now, here's the issue. They're saying that the Sahara became a barren desert 3 million years ago. Okay, that's fine with me. Then it started to climate change every 20,000 years. The Sahara changed from dry to wet. They're saying from wet to dry, dry to wet every 20,000 years. Now, I can agree with it. The pattern of rains changed because of the polar shift. It causes anyway. Let me just go on about this, but it doesn't create an ocean every 20,000 years. It's ridiculous, in my mind. Anyway, the Sahara changed over dry to wet to dry, dry to wet in just centuries, virtually. Scientists have proved, they say, that the pattern of the Sahara's climate changes follow the Earth's wobble. That's fine. They're going to get more rain, less rain, but it doesn't create an ocean. That's not possible. What happened was the Sahara cracked open at the eye of the Sahara and it drained. And I'll show you that in a topography. It's completely obvious. And it's just being ignored. And then they decided that Atlantis has to be where Santorini is and Crete and all this business, the Minoans. And that's also very crazy because it doesn't follow any logic whatsoever if you accept Plato, and I accept him because he got his information from Solon, which was as close to the source as you're ever going to get. So here's the deal. They're saying that the Sahara climate changes every 20,000 years because of the wobble of the Earth. Fine, I accept that the climate changes. I do not accept an ocean created every 20,000 years. And then they say the last time it changed it 7,000 years ago. Fine, I accept that too. And then they say that 5,000 years ago, that desert area was fertile and green. And I say that before that it was an ocean, and they know that. There's whale skeletons and there's all kinds of shells and things, and there's no question it was an ocean. And at 9,000 years prior to Plato, and he describes it, is the land collapsed. An earthquake, not a volcano like Santorini and all these other things. It collapsed in an earthquake. And I know that Plato understood an earthquake from a volcano. He wouldn't say, oh, there was an earthquake. Oh, by the way, there was a volcano, but he doesn't forgets ever to say there was a volcano. That's crazy. What happens is they try to fulfill their own prophecies and they accept anything. The other thing is, it was only 3,500 years ago or 4,000 years ago. We're talking about the Minoans, and they're saying, oh, that was Atlantis. It's all, again, crazy. Plato says it was 9,000 years before him. That's over half of Earth's history that we know of. It's very unbelievable that anything will be accepted to fulfill what they've decided is truth. And the truth is a constructed reality, I'm finding out, in virtually everything there is in science and the academics. So anyway, I'm going to present my evidence. You make the decision, but I think it's silly what they're saying about Crete and Minoa and that area there. That is, I agree that those were eventual areas that the Atlanteans went to because they went from Atlantis, which collapsed. The refugees ran over to Ethiopia. They helped them in Ethiopia. It's all stated in the Ethiopian text. They set them up in Egypt as the pharaohs. They lived in Egypt as the gods and the kings and the pharaohs because they were the privileged class among primitives. And then they decided to move out onto their own island, which is Minoa and Crete and all that business. And I agree with them. I'd go on an island too if I was amongst people that I didn't feel comfortable with. They were rioting and doing who knows whatever they were doing. You know, I'd go back to where I was living too, in the lap of luxury. So that's my take on this. Now I'm going to show you the physical document, physical evidence. Physical evidence shows the real truth. This is a shot of Africa, obviously. Now, we know that the Mediterranean is up in this area, and it's bordered by these states up here, and that would have been the northern extent of any body of water that was here. You can see that this was enclosed around here, and they talk about the Pillars of Hercules, and they say it's here, and I don't dispute that. I have no knowledge about that, but I'll accept that. But anyway, I believe that somewhere in this area this was a bowl and there was a virtual ocean in here. And they know this. There's all kinds of whale skeletons and all kinds of things through here. So they know there was an ocean. There's no question about that. Now, they claim that this ocean forms every 20,000 years because of the wobble of the earth. And I say that's insane. What happened was right over here is the eye of the Sahara. And this is where Atlantis was. It cracked. And you can see, and I'll show you a better shot of this. It drained right into the ocean. This drained out of here, and that was 7,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, whatever. It was when Atlantis crashed. Atlantis crashed 9,000 years before Plato, so we're talking 11,400 years ago. If all of this, what I'm saying, is correct. So 11,400 years ago, I'm saying this cracked, it drained out of here. This was ocean, or some kind of a gigantic, I'd say an ocean, lake, whatever. It drained out of here, and you can see the evidence. It's just like the Grand Canyon in here, and because it's 25 miles wide where this thing is. This is not a little puppy. Now, so she drained out of here, and that took, I don't know, however long. But in the meantime, these guys escaped. When they escaped, they either went this way to South America, and I'm sure some did, and whoever knows where. They had boats. I mean, they weren't, but you know, this was a disaster that took them unaware, it appears. Now, some went this way. We know this because the Ethiopians say that the guys arrived from the west, out of the mud, and they helped them. And they said they were strangers from the west. They arrived from the west, the strangers. And they helped them, and they say they set them up in Egypt, and the two of them were trading partners and buddies for a bazillion years, well, you know, for years and years, and they got along extremely well. And eventually, I believe that the Atlanteans that were now the pharaohs of Egypt decided, well, better to get off of the main shore and get onto a little island like we had before, and then we'll be more protected and secure, and everything will be wonderful, and we don't have to live with these other people. And I think that's what they did. And they went to Minoa. They were the Minoans and Crete and Santorini and all that business up there. And they moved up here. Now, then the Greeks said, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't want you here. And then that's when the whole thing started. But the original thing was over here, and that was Atlantis. All right. Plato gives an extremely accurate, well, I don't know if it's accurate, but he gives an extremely detailed account of what he said Atlantis was. And he was so specific about it that I don't think that that it was just off the top of his head. Because I believe he was a true historian, and his grandfather, his father, everything came down from Solon. I think this was a tradition. It was like a dedication and an obligation felt to his entire family and this whole lineage that he came from. Now, with that said, this is the eye of the Sahara. Now, I have a hard time understanding how this can't be understood. He said that the whole thing from side to side was 25 miles-ish, let's say. He said 9,000 kilometers on the outside ring, so it's 9,000, 18,000, it's 15,000, about 1,500 miles, 15 miles. Yeah, I get confused on this stuff. But anyway, it fits into what? He had 25 miles, and you take the two outside rings and it goes into the inside rings. And look at this. I mean, I would design it this way myself. There's a port coming in here. This looks like it was the deep water section, and then something here they did. I don't know what this is. An internal way coming in. Here's another little port of entry. You got a couple little clicks over here going in and out. When you get into the inner ring, of course these are all rings of water. And then you get into the inner ring, you've got a nice little bay here, probably prime real estate, high rises and condos, all that stuff. Then you got, over here was the plains. They talked about the plains, and there was mountains there too, and there's a little mountain in the spot. This is not something that would have just showed up here by itself. This is not something that is like, to me, this is not explainable by nature. And then I'll show you something that really is not explainable, is how this, well, explainable, but not accepted. Anyway, I just think there's just too much detail here. And when you start looking at this thing from different angles, you can see there's like blocks of whatever they are. Now, Inside here, we should be able to find the actual building materials. There were red, black, and white building materials. And there was metals in here. There was brass and all kinds. I mean, it said they coated these walls with brass. If you read, and then the inside, and the other ones were coated, I think, like silver, and then there's a ochium or ochrum or something, whatever they call it, which is all the metals except gold. Anyway, there's going to be evidence here, and they were caught unaware, so they didn't take everything with them. There's going to be stuff here to look at, and I know that's going to be there. So that's where I would go to look at this. Now, if you start looking at other things about this particular spot, it's just incredible. It's a drain that drained into the ocean. Now, hold on one second. All right, I don't know how much more evidence you need. This is the eye of the Sahara. This way going that direction is Ethiopia, where they ran to. And this is like the Grand Canyon of the Sahara. It's, you look at these sides. This is 25 miles across. These are not little tiny things. And when you get down in the bowl here and look, you can see the earth has cracked around here. Big slabs of cracks where that whole thing has dropped in. This ran right out of here, and it still looks like it would do it today. Only now it's sand instead of water, and it's going right off into the ocean. And I don't see how that could be missed, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, here it is from outer space. Everything ran off here, and that dug a deep ditch through the depth. This cracked and fell in. This was an earthquake. It had nothing to do with a volcano. And they're saying, oh, Santorini volcano, and it's a big round structure, exactly like, of course it's round, it's a volcano. But it's a volcano. It wasn't an earthquake. This was from an earthquake. And Plato claims that they were mining crystals from under the city. And when the earthquake struck, the whole thing collapsed, and sure enough, everything ran right out there. It seems pretty obvious. And that is the only possible way that you could account for an ocean draining and turning into a desert within 5,000 years, I guess we're talking. Well, it was 9,000 years ago. It was 11,500 years. 11,400 years ago, this dropped in, according to Plato. Now, I'm going by his timeline. 11,400 years ago, this thing dropped into the bottom. The water ran out. This started to become wet, muddy lands, and obviously it would do whatever it does as it dries out, and it turned into grasslands and all that. And they say, sure enough, it was grasslands and all that just 5,000 years ago. So now we go from 11,000 to 400. They go 5,000 years ago. The articles say that it was grassland at this point. So it drained within a few, I don't know how quick, it might have drained within a few days, I have no clue. But it became, obviously it wouldn't just turn into a desert in 15 minutes, it's going to take a while for that to happen. And it did. And I believe that the wobble of the earth, sure enough, draws water away from this area at certain times during that wobble. I accept that. But I'm not going to draw a desert out. I mean an ocean, and turn it into a desert, because the wobble of the earth is not possible. That right there is the cause. I mean, it's so obvious, it's incredible that nobody's seen this before. I mean, look, that's where the crack is right there. And look at what it's done. It's just too much evidence to not understand what happened here. And in the history talks about it. The Ethiopians explain the whole thing. It's not even a mystery, to be perfectly honest with you. If you look at it carefully and think about it, it's just exactly appears to be what happened.